Welcome to the Scrum Master Power Hour. We have a big crowd that's collected for this great event with our Agile leader, Brian. We'll get to him in just a moment. As you probably know, if you've been here before, I have a couple of slides just to get us started because some of you, like myself, are visual learners and you need to see things. So here's our backlog for tonight. Quick welcome and introduction. I want to tell you a little bit about an upcoming event that I have. Some of you already know about it, but I'm always excited to share. And then we will get to our guest speaker, which is Brian Rella, director at Wells Fargo. He's going to be chatting with me in a fireside chat format about how to build a successful relationship with, and I need to change this, so pardon me, on live on the call, leaders. Successful relationship between Scrum Masters and leaders. And kind of like last time we had a fireside chat, we should have about 15 to 20 minutes for all of you folks to ask your questions as well. So I hope you came prepared because Brian's ready for you. All right, so who am I? You probably know me from LinkedIn. That's probably how you signed up for this Power Hour, but I'm Patty. I'm the founder of Agile Mindset Consulting. I am passionate about Scrum Masters. So I am a Scrum Master career coach. I help people through the very pivotal years, 0 through about 3, when you're onboarding to your new role and really starting to get the feel of it. So I do private coaching, I do Scrum Master group coaching and training, and I also go into companies and I work with Agile leadership teams and their Scrum Masters. So I started this Power Hour in July of last year, so we're coming up on a year, to support and provide a forum for newer Scrum Masters to build community in a safe space. I've been to many meetups in my life. A lot of them talk way above a new Scrum Master's head. And I was determined to start a meetup that is not that. So I've been working passionately since last July on building this group, the Scrum Master Power Hour. So thank you for coming and thank you for being here to support each other. So the exciting thing that I have coming up, as you probably saw on LinkedIn in the past few days, I am opening up admission for my new Scrum Simulator cohort. I have 2 that are in full swing and I'm opening up July. So some of you I'm in the process of talking to see if we're a good fit for this program, but this is a 4-month program to help you go from being what I call a Scrum Master to really nailing your role, to fill the gap between the knowledge and the doing. So I'll start you up as a new team. You will get experience doing all the things. So the practices, including the 3 roles, 5 events, and 3 artifacts of the framework. You will build your Scrum Master skills and also build your brand network and practice your interviewing skills. So this starts the week of July 18th, and I have 2 spots left and they're first come, first serve. So if you're interested, please reach out and let me know, and I will gladly have a chat with you about it. All right, well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to get to who we're all here to see. All right, well, kind of like we had a few weeks ago, a fireside chat with somebody that's, I would call tangential to the Scrum team or the Scrum Master role. We have another wonderful friend of mine, Brian Rella, coming here to have a fireside chat. So Brian, I'm going to have you introduce yourself, tell us about your career journey, and then I'll give the folks in the room a little context about how we know each other after you do that. So the floor is yours.
Sure, thanks, Patty. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, great. Well, Patty, thank you so much for having me onto your Power Hour. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone. I'm super excited, a little bit nervous, so just bear with me. A little bit about me. I have been in financial services for the last 22 years. It was something of a passion that I discovered early on. In fact, I can remember visiting the New York Stock Exchange in college and feeling the buzz and excitement of the actual trading floor. And I knew that that was something that I wanted to have in my life. And I started my career in wealth management. And I think it was probably 6 years into my career where I really hit my stride, and I really focused and knew that I wanted to be involved in what we call change the bank. And change the bank is all about how do we create new products and services and systems that support those new products and services for enhancing existing business or starting new business. I have worked for many large bulge bracket banks in multiple positions. Most recently, I'm currently at Wells Fargo right now, where I'm a director and I'm leading an agile transformation while also maintaining existing operations and executing a large portfolio of work for an electronic trading business. I will also try and keep the jargon to a minimum because I know that not everybody has the same background here. So I think that's kind of my high level background story. Thank you very much again for having me, Patty.
Absolutely. So just for context, Brian and I, well, as probably you all know, I worked at Wells Fargo, but that's not how I know Brian, right? The bank is huge. And the chances are you work at Wells Fargo and you don't interact with the people you meet out on the street, right? And besides, you live in New York, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so I'm in Charlotte. Brian and I belong to the same mastermind group. And I forgot to mention this when Brian Childress was here, but he also belongs to the same mastermind group. And we joined, it's been a few months, right?
It has been, yeah.
Okay. And the reason I want to bring this up is because you always want to put yourself with people that are in the same room with people that are the movers and the shakers, the ones that want to push themselves out of their comfort zone and continuously advance their career. And that helps you keep your eyes on where you're going, so to speak. So the folks that are in this mastermind, they're not all Agilists, just so you know, but we are meeting once every 2 weeks to interact with each other, hold each other accountable, and help each other just along our career journeys. But the other thing is that we talk, I mean, every day, right, on Voxer. So even though we're only meeting biweekly, Brian and the other Brian and I are constantly talking and chatting and pushing each other and striving to help each other become the best. So if you have an opportunity to join a group such as that, I highly recommend it. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Brian. I mean, it helps you build strong relationships really quickly. And then when you need somebody for something, you can reach out and you know that they'll be right there to help you. Kind of like I reached out to you and said, hey, can you come speak to my meetup group? And it was a no-brainer for you. Same thing with Brian Childress. And the thing is, we know each other, we like each other, and we trust each other. So I feel comfortable bringing you into my group of Scrum Masters because I know who you are. And you're not going to say something crazy and then they're left thinking, oh my God, who is this Patty friends with? So I want to be able to stand behind the people that I bring in here, and I have to know who those people are. So I don't know if you want to say anything about that, or we can just move on.
No, I think you said it really well. I mean, it's about support and friendship and always moving forward and surrounding yourself with people that challenge you and bring out the best in you.
Well, that's what we're going to do today, Brian, because I'm probably going to ask you some challenging questions.
I'm ready.
But, you know, as we've always talked, you know, our goal is the same, and the goal is to help the organization become agile, help each other on this journey, even though we're playing different roles. So what I want to start with, speaking of roles, you're a director in an agile organization. What is a director? What do you do all day? Who do you interact with? And can you give us some context, like how many levels above a Scrum Master are you?
Okay, sure. So director is simply a corporate title. Each corporation will have variations on it. So for example, in Wells Fargo organization, I believe it goes associate, vice president, director, managing director. And that's kind of the title progression that you can make as your career advances, as your level of expertise grows, and as your responsibilities grow. There are different divisions throughout organizations. And just to put it into context, Wells Fargo is a 248,000 person organization. So there are multiple lines of business that all have these different titles in them. The line of business, I guess the macro line of business I'm in, is the commercial and investment bank. So we deal with primarily institutional customers that come to the bank for various services. And within that role, I'm in the markets division, and we are focused on I'm focused on electronic trading, but markets cover institutional trading of various securities. So stocks, bonds, derivatives of those, to name a few. And then within the markets organization, Wells Fargo has carved out a specific business called electronic trading. And what that's about, and this is kind of where Agile comes in, is a lot of the legacy processes for trading securities between individuals, an individual institution, or institutions have largely been manual, meaning they're done over the phone, to the point where in the beginning, in the first days of the New York Stock Exchange, they had a job called a runner, who actually, when a stock trade was made, this person would run from institution to institution down on Wall Street with a bag of stock certificates and actually settle the trade physically with the person. So from that starting point, we've come to, well, how do we do that electronically? And so over time, we built up systems that take that physical activity and make it digital. And as we're moving into more and more sophisticated and faster ways, more efficient ways of doing things, Agile has taken root. And probably I would say over the last 5 years, I have not seen any banks working in the older models, the waterfall model of delivering products and software. Most of them are on a journey, which never really ends, but on the journey to become an agile organization. I can keep going. Does anybody have questions?
No, you can see for the audience in the room, right? They're aspiring Scrum Masters, or some of them are Scrum Masters. So they're on the team level where
right.
The folks, the developers, are building software features and delivering them. So you're saying you're multiple levels above that, and you're coordinating all of it.
Yeah, sorry. So I lost track of the original question there. So
what does a director do all day?
What does a director do in my organization in electronic trading? I work with the business leadership to understand what their demands are, what their future state looks like in terms of how we're going to bring the electronic trading product forward. So we work on strategy. We talk through what the competition is doing, what our capabilities are, and what what we kind of what our priorities are across these different platforms for trading.
Open up my
So,
system. Bring me those white.
so once we have kind of settled on a strategy, we then move into a more planning phase and start to incorporate other levels and roles in the organization. You know, we come up with multi-year roadmaps, which we then break down into yearly roadmaps, quarterly roadmaps, and then we start getting into our agile cadences, where we're working directly with technology leadership and non-technology leadership to understand what a particular initiative requires to bring it from idea to market. And right now, you know, we're actually going to start planning for 2023. So it's a really interesting time. One of the things we look at is, you know, given the aspirations we have to grow the business, you know, what roles are we looking to fill? What roles do we have to scale up? What roles do we have to scale back on? Where are we kind of spending most of our money? And so that plays into kind of the agile delivery teams. And, you know, generally right now we're in a place where we have more work than we could possibly handle. So it's a really interesting time. And, you know, Scrum Masters are really driving the engine of delivery. So in my organization, once it goes from strategy into delivery, like we pretty much hand off and trust our partners in the technology groups to deliver on and to understand what we're trying to accomplish first, and then to deliver on that. And so it's a real partnership throughout multiple levels of the firm.
So now when you say you deliver to partners, can you give us some context, like what does that mean? Because I think to a Scrum Master, that's a very vague word.
Yeah.
And we have no idea who you're talking about.
Fair enough. Okay. So our partners would first, I guess I could break it down. Let's say we finished strategizing for the next quarter. Our next task is we have our list of priorities. Now we need to talk to the technology leadership to understand, you know, these are what we want. Are you able to deliver that within a quarter? So there's an assessment phase where they're analyzing the ask. Generally, at this point, we're working with product owners who understand, you know, the velocity of the teams that they're on, and what can be accomplished, you know, how many stories can be accomplished per sprint. And so we may have conversations such as this particular initiative is, you know, will require 5 sprints. We can deliver, because we can deliver 8 stories per sprint with this team. And so we're kind of juggling priorities at that point. And then locking in an agenda for the quarter or the next product increment. And then technology leadership will go to their different Scrum teams and start laying out the work. And so we'll have individual Scrums working on components of the overall delivery. And then we have a Scrum of Scrums that pulls all that together, so that we have a full understanding of where the dependencies are, where all the progress is, are we tracking to plan, are there any obstacles that need removing, you know, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Where I come in that is really removing obstacles and providing executive summary level updates to strategy. So I'm working directly with delivery team leadership to kind of understand, you know, the status, any obstacles, any risks, and trying to help them clear those out of the way.
Yeah, no, that's great. That I don't want to speak for everybody in the room, but that gives me some context how you fit into the Agile organization. So the term that I hear a lot is look to the left. Have you heard that term before?
I haven't actually, but I can infer the meaning, I guess.
take a guess, right?
Yeah.
The Scrum team has their backlog, and then they look to the left to maybe the product backlog. And then the product backlog looks left to, I don't know, is there another backlog at the portfolio level?
Right.
And then they maybe look to the backlog that's at your level.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So you're discussing things on a strategy level, and then you have conversations with product owners about prioritization.
Right. So we work directly with the leadership, the strategic leadership of the business.
Right.
Then we partner with product to really map out the plan and start focusing on delivery and execution.
Okay. Some of the, this is making me think, I have a whole bunch of questions here, but, some of the things you've said kind of made me think of some other things. When it comes to product owners pushing back on the people above them because they know what their team's capacity is, and they say, we can only deliver X this sprint. Do you feel like that's a conversation? Or do you feel like the leaders just shut that down and say, I need you to deliver this anyway? From your perspective, because from a Scrum Master's perspective, we have, I guess, a perception of what goes on outside the team.
Yeah.
And they think, well, the leaders or business says jump, and the product owners have to just jump, so to speak. So from your perspective, what do you see going on that we don't? That maybe our assumption is wrong or right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a dance, right? So there is unlimited demand, right? And sometimes in business, opportunities arise that warrant discussion. Having been a product manager myself, like, I recognize the challenge. You want to facilitate the business growing, but at the same time, you want to protect the team that you're working with. And so it's a bit of a dance. It's kind of like when I was a product manager, I always presented leadership with options and helped them to come to a conclusion. So I played a facilitator role. A good example is, you're in the middle of a sprint, say your cycle is 2 weeks and you've just started, your second sprint. So you've got already some traction on a product increment, but a sales guy comes in hot and heavy with, the next best thing, right? And he's got dollars behind it. He's got support of leadership behind it. So he wants to get it done, right? Because he's getting paid to produce revenue, right? He's getting paid to bring in money. And he needs the support of his technology team in order to deliver to his client and bring that revenue in. So of course, his aim is to get as much production as possible out of the product team. Now, facing off to that guy, you have to be prepared to have factual, difficult conversations, right? As a product owner, because that you just started an increment that was super important 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. And you can stop and start something new, but as a product manager or product owner, that's not the best use of everyone's time, because that start and stop creates disruption, creates frustration, and you kind of want to shield the team to that. So, long way of saying, like, I understand, having sat in those shoes as a product, being a part of a product team, I understand the pressure of a salesperson coming in and needing to make a sale. I also understand the pressure that delivery teams have, and you try and balance that as best you can. the way that I've been able to do that is to produce options. We can stop here. Here's the risks of that. Here's what could happen. Yes, you'll get your delivery. It will happen in 8 weeks' time. This code will be sitting here unfinished. We'll have to then reinvigorate the code and get back in the mindset of what we wanted to build again, and that's going to take time. Or we can prioritize this for the next sprint or the next product increment. Can you help manage the client? And it's kind of a negotiation like that. And again, I think you want to protect the engine. You're not going anywhere without the engine, and the delivery team is the engine. So you always want to protect the engine, and that's kind of my perspective on it. And it's a little bit of negotiation with the business.
No, it is good to hear that perspective. I think because the delivery team and Scrum Masters are typically far removed from those conversations, especially as they're higher up at your level, for example. We make all sorts of assumptions and we get frustrated. We might get angry.
Yeah.
But I think the important point, which I love you said, it's a negotiation, but we all have to be at that table with the conversation. So I think, from my perspective, right, having worked on delivery teams, they need to feel like their voices are heard. And I think sometimes they feel like they don't, and they get frustrated because, to your point, we've been working on this so hard and now we have to drop it and switch to something else. And I think if somehow all the levels of the organization can have conversations, not like, slide decks and status meetings, that everybody will feel like their voice is heard and we can figure it out together. But I think with, top-down management, it's such a contradiction to Agile because I think that's the way historically things have been done.
I would agree with that. I think a couple of things. The larger the organization, the more hierarchy, and the more you're removed from those conversations. The smaller the organization, the flatter the organization, and the more input you'll have, or less removed you'll feel from that situation. In either case, communication is the key. Lack of communication will just stop projects dead, and create, like you were saying, create all of these scenarios that we kind of play in our minds, like, why are these guys doing this to us? Don't they understand? And I think you have to kind of step back and recognize the complexity of the organization and all the competing priorities. And the best way for you to contribute to being part of the solution is just communicate. Communicate calmly and with facts. Frustration isn't going to change the fact that somebody's asking you to do something that is wrong, or that you feel very strongly is the incorrect direction. What will, though, is having a calm conversation with somebody who's facing off to, the decision makers. And I think that's critical to have the kind of facts to hand, and then bring that to the attention of your leaders so that they can then use that as part of the conversation that they're having. And it kind of has this, like, reverse waterfall effect. You're like going up the waterfall in front instead of down, right? You're rolling up information so that there is that transparency into what's happening, what's being felt. And I think it's something that every large organization struggles with, that communication.
So how do Scrum Masters feel empowered to have those conversations, right? Sometimes with people 1, 2, maybe 3 levels above their head, and they feel intimidated because of that power structure, because of the hippo, the highest paid person in the organization. How how do they get over that fear of not wanting to bring these hard things up with leaders? And not be scared that they're going to get fired, because like that's what I see in organizations. I don't want to open my mouth because I'm so afraid I'm going to get fired.
Yeah.
Like, what would you say to Scrum Masters about that?
So you have to ask yourself, is it true? Like, if I'm bringing a risk to the attention of my leadership, is that a firing offense? I don't think it is. So, it's the simplest thing in the world to sit here and say, well, you just have to have the courage, right? But
Right.
it's so hard. It's so hard, especially when you're talking to people that are, in large organizations for multiple years and have, this polished experience. I think, you have to kind of overcome that fear somewhat, though. You have to take ownership, right? Because the worst case scenario is you don't raise the risk and something falls apart, and you're kind of at fault for that, right? That's a worst case scenario. I think a better case scenario is talking with your management and saying, look, I see this risk, I'm raising it to your attention. I think we should have a conversation about this. I'm happy to contribute to that conversation, and offer yourself, right? Any choice you make should be for the better of the project, the company. It should be for your intentions should be true and honest, right? You're not trying to raise anything to cause problems. You're raising something because you see a risk. And I think as a business leader, I want to know that. I need to know that, because if I don't know that, then there's too much stuff under the covers that could come out and bite me. And you have to remember, the leadership has their own management team. And so if something happens and they're not aware of it, or a risk is not realized, or sorry, they're not made aware of a risk and then it's realized, and it causes a financial error in a bank, for example, that's a big problem for a leadership. So I think a good senior leader is somebody who is open to having conversations about these things, and who is welcoming of feedback from above, from the side, from below as well. I think that's part of being a good leader.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because it is intimidating. And I mean, I've had to push myself out of my comfort zone and, to your point, bring up challenging things. But if you come with data, right? Because leaders are big on data. They're big on metrics, right? If you're confident in the numbers and you show them the numbers, there's a risk here. Look at these numbers.
That's right. I think you nailed it there. Come with data, come with confidence. You're not going to get fired for raising a risk.
Yeah.
A good manager, a good leader will say, great job. Thanks for pointing that out. You really helped me here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that's on people's minds a lot when talking to people outside the team. So thank you.
And by the way, Patty, everybody's felt that. I felt that too. When everybody feels that pressure when you're new to an organization, and if you're just coming out of a role, like, you're not alone, right? And I think groups like this, where you can hear other people sharing the same situation you find yourself in, and just knowing that you're not alone in these situations, it's extremely powerful, right? Because you're not alone. I'm not the only one going through this. Everybody's struggling with this.
Yep. It's who's going to be the one that has the courage to open their mouth. I've had to learn to be that person. But yeah, it is. It's scary. I have found that everybody has the same question. Nobody wants to raise their hand and ask it. Right. And it goes back to like, when you join an organization, every company has their own lingo. And
Mhm.
everybody's talking like you should just know what's going on and you should know what they're talking about, and you don't want to ask because you don't want to be the only person that doesn't know, so you just hide, right? And somewhere along the line, I'll pick it up. I want to tell a sort of funny story with me related to that, right? So when I started at Wells Fargo, and just for everybody's context, Brian, you may not know what I'm talking about, but I was working with their marketing teams, and I'm listening to their lingo and trying to pick it up, right? They're speaking another language, and I get it to the point where I'm like, okay, I can sort of follow what they're talking about. But then they were bringing up the 5 families. Have you heard this term?
Not heard the
Okay, so maybe
only
this
the-
is a marketing thing. That's why I said
Yeah.
Wells Fargo is a big company. The 5 families, the 5 families. I'm like, what are the 5 families? Like, should I know these people? And I didn't want to say anything or ask. And this is the part that's funny. I'm just going to say it because, I just say random stuff. But when I think of 5 families, I think of like The Godfather and like the mommy.
That's what I was going to say.
Right. And that's like, but you have to understand, like, that's my frame of reference, right? So that's what I think of. So it's always important to clarify words because you always default to what's already in your brain, right? Because you're trying to make the connections. Finally, I just asked, who are these 5 families? And they told me it's like accounting, legal, compliance. I'm like, oh, okay. But again, like, and I made the joke. I said, it sounds like mafia. And, everyone laughed and it was funny. I didn't get in trouble or fired, but it's kind of like that type of thing. Like, you go into a company and you're so overwhelmed with what's being discussed and you don't want to raise your hand, and you have to get past that fear because nobody, even people that are working there, nobody knows what's going on.
Definitely ask questions. It doesn't hurt to ask questions. There's no stupid questions. And in fact, speaking of acronyms, I'm sure you're aware that, or maybe you're not, Wells Fargo has an acronym dictionary
Yes.
right on the homepage.
And there are multiple acronyms to mean the same acronym means multiple things.
Right.
So it's very confusing. And that's why you just have to ask. I started like a little acronym dictionary where I was writing stuff down in a notebook. And that's what helped me. And eventually you pick it up. But I want to ask one more question before we get to the audience, because I think this is an important one. The concept of systems thinking. So as a Scrum Master on a development team, you know what's going on in the context of the team. But there are many teams in the organization that all impact each other. So sometimes as a Scrum Master, you get very frustrated and say, well, there's this darn impediment. Why is it so hard to get this darn impediment removed? The solution is so simple. They just have to do X. Why won't the leaders just do X? And what I've learned as an Agile coach, like moving up the level in the organization, is your simple solution may have some type of downstream impact that you are not aware of.
That's right.
So can you talk a little bit about that, expand on that concept of systems thinkings and the challenge with impediment removal?
Yeah, sure. It's a big dependency matrix, right? Because all the systems, especially in larger organizations, like a bank or like even in Amazon or Facebook, all these systems, they're integrated. And so what seems like a simple fix to one team has a knock-on effect or a ripple effect to other teams potentially. And so a lot of what we do with some of the technical leadership is they help us understand these interdependencies across systems. And again, I'm going to come back to it. It's communication, right? If I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm trying to prioritize an initiative and my technology leader is explaining to me why it's going to take 3 months instead of 2 weeks, right? that communication of that system and the impact that one little change will have on other systems, he needs to bring that data to the table so that I have an understanding. And then that puts me in a position of knowledge, and we can have a common understanding of this is why a certain item is in the way. This is why it's going to take this long to remove it. And we run into that constantly. You know, systems are, especially in organizations that have a large amount of technical debt or legacy systems that they're retiring and bringing on new systems. It's an onion. It's layer upon layer upon layer that has been, you know, built, patched, rebuilt by different teams, by multiple hands. It's a very complex system. It's, you know, a spider web is a good analogy, right? And you have to be careful what part of the web you touch. And I think if you go in with that kind of understanding, while still making your case, like this is, you know, a simple change, but seeking to understand the other person's point of view and the reasoning, that helps alleviate any of the frustration.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, because I know when I was a Scrum Master, definitely frustrating. I'm like, man, why don't these leaders just take care of this? And I think some of the challenges that I've seen in organization, and it comes down to communication. The Scrum Masters and even some of the Agile coaches that I've worked with feel like the leaders don't communicate back down the chain.
Yeah.
We communicate up the chain what the impediments are, and they say, okay, and it kind of goes into a black hole. And if the information comes back down the chain, like we can't work on this, hang tight for 3 months, or we'll get on this right away, but, you know, understand that, you know, we got to wait for this person to do this first. I think to your point, it's like having everybody be on the same page with a common understanding.
Yeah.
Will alleviate the frustration.
Yeah, and it's very hard to do when you're talking about multiple organizations. So I think you have to just kind of go into the, you know, I'm assuming we're talking about large organizations, right? We're not talking about, you know, a 50-person software company.
Yeah.
When you get into the thousands of people, it's really challenging to keep that. It's a game of telephone, right? A small group of people, a limited group of people come to some conclusion or have some bit of knowledge that you need to know, and you're all the way over here and they're all the way over here, and there's, you know, people in between that are passing the message along. So you really have to go in with that understanding and just be at ease with it. You know, it's very difficult to have a consistent message throughout an organization unless the CEO is speaking to the entire 248,000 person company in one email.
Right. Yeah. Super challenging. And I've found that I have to repeat myself so many times over and over, say the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to your point, just be okay with it, accept that that's the way it is. But I'll tell you, like, I don't keep bringing up Wells Fargo because you work there, but I'm just thinking about some of the things that I dealt with while I was there. And I mean, it took 6 months to remove an impediment. And I kept talking to my boss's boss, and they were super on board. Like, they're like, we're working on it. And it's just this constant line of communication between us.
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, they talk across their layer of the organization and they got it fixed. But it was like a broken record.
Yeah. And that's all you could do, right? You know, I would say too that a way to stand out and is to solve some of those communication problems. So you could flip it and say, I see this challenge with the organization. Here's a potential solution. And I feel like leadership loves hearing about solutions. They hear about problems all day long. Even if your solution isn't perfect, right? It could be a starting point for a future solution. So when you recognize an opportunity to close communication gaps or improve a process or whatever the improvement is, be vocal about it, raise it, and create awareness about it, because that's a way for you to stand out and make a name for yourself as a problem solver. And we all love problem solvers.
With that being said, here's a perfect segue. Who has a problem for Brian to solve? Now let's take some questions and answers here. We have a little over 10 minutes left here. Who has one? I mean, you can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat. What do you want to know? He's here.
Hi, thanks for having me in the meeting. And it was very educational regarding the communication, keep repeating the same point until it's heard. But the things is that how do you deal the case that I see in other meetup, a lot of people bring that up. It came to my attention that sometimes PO is not available to the Scrum team. I understand everybody has a busy schedule, but at the end of the day, that's what he or she wanted to make that happen. So they need to make themselves available for the Scrum Master and as well as the Scrum team. If you think that that happens a lot, it comes to your attention that he or she is not as available as it should be. How do you deal with this one? Because you don't want to escalate everything just right away to the higher level. So regarding the communication, get the job done. How do you deal with that? Thank you so much if you share your feedback with me.
Sure. No, it's a great question. I guess, again, I would bring it back to risk, right? If the product owner is ignoring you and you have something that is going to create an impediment to delivery, or is it an issue that needs to be resolved because there's a flaw in the design or something like that, the product owner has to make himself available. And if they're not, and they're continually ignoring you, then that might be something that you want to raise with the manager, because it could be a behavioral issue that you want to correct. Yeah, you also, on the flip side of that, though, you also have to have patience. I mean, we don't want to be kind of, sending chats and emails every hour, right? Give people a chance to respond. Understand that everybody is busy. Nobody's kind of sitting around waiting for work. They're all occupied with something, and just having that understanding and thinking the best of people. I find, the worst happens when you start getting those frustrated feelings and you start thinking the person has a bad intent, right? Because 99% of the time, it's not that they have bad intentions. It's just that they're truly busy. And have an understanding and patience about that, because that may happen to you one day. So I think it's a combination of, weighing the risks of what you're trying to communicate. And if it's, a legitimately critical issue that needs to be raised, then you do want to escalate it, right? But if it's something that is not going to create a revenue loss or create some other catastrophic issue, just kind of have a little patience and persistence, and remember that you're all on the same team. You're all working towards the same common goal, and just be aware that everybody has competing priorities.
That's true. If we have time, can I add one more thing to this topic? Do you mind?
Sure.
Okay. So I think the other thing that came to my attention, you are right. Everybody has a good intention. At the end of the day, we want to get the job done, right? So we don't want to be like a create impediment for each other, because it's all we are sitting in the same boat all together. But one thing I realized that it's just a matter of awareness that PO sometimes doesn't have a good understanding about his or her role in this dimension, and like a continuously grooming the backlog.
Well, let's just go.
Excuse me.
Oh, I muted the person.
Okay, so It's okay. So, the concept of the job of the PO that constantly grooming the backlog, constantly be in touch with the Scrum Master. It's just not the defined role that create that miscommunication. How do you deal with this case that he or she is a nice person, but they just don't know if they have to be that much available.
That's a tough one. It's all about relationships. You can you can make suggestions to people, but sometimes you just have to work with who you have on the team. And I find confronting people about things like that can put people on the defense, and you really don't want to do that. So I would try and be encouraging. I would try and be understanding. The main thing is you want to keep the product, you want to keep the engine running, and you want to keep things moving forward. And you have to kind of deal with different personalities and different people all the time, whether it's life or work. So it's just it comes with the territory. I don't really have a great answer for that. It's just you deal with it. I deal with it all the time, right? I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think that one thing that I'm understanding, with a couple of questions that I had, at the end of the day, soft skill talks. I
That's
need
right.
to all my soft skill to create a relation and build a bridge to the person's mind and heart. Yeah, soft skill. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
I appreciate
it.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you for your questions. I think we have time for another one or two. So who wants to go?
Yeah, I have a question.
Hey,
Yeah,
Trey.
what advice would you give to a person, maybe with no or little experience trying to get into the Scrum Master world, and just kind of what we were saying from your kind of higher level, just trying to get into the industry?
Sure. I think networking into groups such as this is a very big step. I think the Scrum Simulator course that Patty offers is fantastic. It gives you it puts your knowledge to practical use, which is huge because I think textbook learning is great and it gives a foundation, but putting that knowledge into action is really what employers want. I also have a coaching business, and what I tell my clients is what I'll tell you. Connect with people. Don't be afraid to reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, my name's Trey. I'm new to the Scrum Master world. I see you've been at such and such company for the last 3 years in this role. Love to pick your brain sometime if you have a minute, right? And just start a conversation. That could lead to opportunities. It might not lead to a direct job offer, and in fact, I wouldn't ask for a job in those conversations, but
Right.
it could help you lead. It could lead you to opportunities that you wouldn't normally have. Just kind of applying and praying on LinkedIn. So again, a lot of it's about communication and relationship building.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. And I want to piggyback on that for just a second. It takes time. And I love how you said, don't call somebody up like a stranger and say, can you give me a job?
Right.
I mean, how would you feel if somebody did that to you? Right? It's like, it's a relationship, right? You have to build that trust over time. And then the person sees you're serious and says, hey, I got a friend who's looking for a Scrum Master. So it's a long game, so to speak.
Sure. But
don't give up on it. I think, let's see, Phil, I know you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
No, let's let Sandra go. I think you guys hit the nail on the head. So
sure. Okay. Sonia.
Hi, I have a question. So as a new Scrum Master, trying to get into the field. I've been looking for a lot of free resources. And I've started listening to podcasts. And the ones that I find myself really drawn to are the ones that talk mostly about soft skills, like Badass Agile. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but it's been really cool to listen to and very inspiring and motivating. Are there any podcasts that Patty or Brian that you would recommend listening to? I know there's tons of lists, but what do you guys listen to, and what do you find motivates you or helps you with those challenges, if you do at all?
I'll go for, I actually am not a big podcast person. I'm a big reader. And I actually wrote, I have a great book. I don't know if you're into reading, but
You do exactly what I do on the calls.
this book, Doing Agile Right, it talks about Agile from top to bottom. You can see I have my little sticky notes in here. It's written by 3 authors, so Daryl Rigby, Sarah Elk, and Steve Beres. It's fantastic. It doesn't just talk about a specific role. It talks about the organizational transformation and how each part of the organization plays a part. So you get like a big picture. And I think there was something like these guys are consultants, so they've done this like 400 times.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. That's why I wanted to like crack up. I do the same thing. I turn around and pull books off my bookshelf and I'll say, read this. The 5 dysfunctions of a team. I bring it up everywhere.
Yeah.
Like repeat, right? Broken record, 5 dysfunctions of a team. That is great. Here's another one. Brian, I'm going to copy you. I brought this one up before. The Power of Regret, Daniel Pink. Right. And one of the other guys in our mastermind, Matt, actually saw him speak, Daniel Pink. God, I was like jealous. Like, how did you get invited to that? I love this guy. His books are about human behavior, but it's all Agile, like Agile's written all over it. That talks about the power of retrospective, personal retrospective. So instead of beating yourself up, learn from it and move on and make a different decision. And this is exactly the message that you need to speak out to your team.
I'll put pressure on you, Patty. It'd be awesome for your network, your group. I just love what you do for starting this group. But I'm somebody who, since about 2016, reads about 5 books a month. And I've reread a lot of these many, multiple times. It's changed my life. But it'd be cool if you could provide and not just categorize and share with the group. I get it all the time. What books would you recommend? Things like that. This comes up. And I do what you guys do, only now I do the Kindle version. So I try to hold up my
on your phone.
But it really, for those that learn in that facet or Audible or anything, just so awesome. And just by these conversations come up all the time. So it'd be cool if somewhere in your group, because I know you use Miro and other tools, if there's somewhere that people could share books, because I think a lot of us could probably, I've categorized 100 books that have changed, that have been out in the last 4 years that have changed the way we run transformation of that. So always a great topic.
Nice.
Excellent. All right. I don't know, Brian, do you have time for one last question?
I could do one more, yeah, and then I do have to go. But
okay.
I hear the kids upstairs. I don't know if you guys heard the like I said before we got started, Patty, I knew it was going to happen. So
they didn't interrupt at all. So
oh, good, you didn't.
We made it through an hour.
All
right. Well, Brian, if that's the case, we want to respect your time, right? And the
no, you're fine. No, seriously, one more question is fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Who's got a good one?
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
See if nobody has any.
Okay. So I know in terms of seeing a issue as a Scrum Master, you think that team is making the wrong decision or not have a good communication, anything that as experienced person, that doesn't go anywhere or not going to the right direction. I know some stuff you hold it out to the retro meeting, but sometimes you think that better not to wait until to have a retro. So how do you raise it? When do you address it? Because at the same time, you want to let the team get experience. We're not manager, we're a Scrum Master, right? Facilitator. You want them experience and learn from their mistake as well. You don't want to jump. But how do you deal with this? You know that this is not the case. You wait for retro, but when and how you do address it? Thank you.
Yeah, how big is the issue, right? Is it going to really cause a major problem? Then you want to address it immediately. I think these are things that you have to kind of assess on your own, and it's very subjective, right? So if I'm talking about like a behavior, for example, some product owners' user stories are consistently missing critical information, then that's something I would correct in the process of grooming the backlog or prioritization or wherever I'm interacting with that person. Retros are great when there's in my experience when there's big failures, and you want to avoid those, right? So I would say assess the situation. If it's something that is going to that will prevent a bad outcome, then address it immediately.
Yeah, exactly. If the case is not major, is not behavioral issue, and also is not very major, but you knew that you're not going to have potential shippable product after 2 weeks. It's not major, but based on your experience, you're not going to deliver anything. So that's
so that to me is major. If I'm not able to ship in 2 weeks and I'm committed to shipping in 2 weeks, then I want to call that out.
Okay, good to know the size. Okay, so okay, thank you. It is wonderful.
Great questions. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian. We appreciate your time, your expertise. I'm sure I'll be talking to you tomorrow. I always
for
do.
sure. It was great speaking with you all. Thank you all very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right. And I'll be sending the recording out in a few days, so you can watch this back. And of course, for those of us that missed it, they will get to see this in its entirety. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great Tuesday evening.
Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.